Welcome to Create Income with or Without a Job. I'm Jamila Harris, your Create Income coach. And we are thrilled to be joined today by one of the most extraordinary women entrepreneurs and friends. And her name is Dr. Marilyn Brathwaite Hall. Dr. Marilyn Hall, thank you so much for being with us.
Good afternoon. It is my pleasure. I'm always excited to assist and connect with anything that you're in the midst of, Jamila. So thank you so much, and good afternoon to the listening audience and viewing audience.
Well, I'm really excited about them getting to know you and receiving from your amazing gift that you have for personal coaching and assisting us to literally travel through adversity and uncertainty and with some sense of, resurrection and redemption and self-care. If you'll allow me one moment, I would like to share your background with our viewing audience. Dr. Marilyn Brathwaite Hall is a certified personal coach and consultant who brings an integrated perspective to counseling, personal coaching, and psychoeducation. Dr. Hall conducts coaching to assist individuals to restore mental wellness and transform their lives after suffering mental, physical, and emotional trauma. Adversity in her personal life experiences have anchored Dr. Hall's deep appreciation for the transforming power of the human spirit through triumphs, traumas, and brokenness. Dr. Hall earned her bachelor's degree from Tufts University and an EDM from Harvard University, and further specialized in counseling psychology through study at Northeastern University and a postdoctoral fellowship at Georgia State University. Dr. Marilyn Brathwaite Hall co-hosts a weekly radio show and podcast, Wellness Wednesdays, where she coaches and inspires individuals to restore well-being after the trauma of Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017. She is the mother of two daughters, Sakile and Kiamsha, and wife of David Hall, president of the University of the Virgin Islands. So we are delighted to have with us today Dr. Marilyn Brathwaite Hall. And Marilyn, I just want to help us to introduce you more personally to our viewers. You are one of those people who is literally using your own personal experiences and your natural talents, gifts, and abilities in a unique way that has evolved into your profession as a professional personal coach. Just share whatever you'd like to about your background that led you here.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you again so much, Jamila, for the opportunity to share. So I think what's important is it's always useful to begin from at least the beginning. Context matters, right? Where you come from helps to direct the path and the way. So by birth, I am a Jamaican woman born on the island of Jamaica up in the country. So my beginnings and origins come from a rural background with no electricity or running water as a child. Part of my story then evolves from the immigrant journey for many who may be listening and viewing as my parents went to the United States in the mid to late 60s to find that better way. Our perception of the land of milk and honey, you go pick the money off the trees and just take big cups of that, those honey that we perceive to be the case. So I'm an immigrant child and evolved from being in the islands, growing up with my grandmother until the age of about 5, until my parents sent for us and my other sister. And so the journey of an immigrant child into a place that was new and different, experiencing cold for the first time, snow for the first time, adjusting to this norm that was different from what I had known, living in the city in, at the time, Brooklyn, feeling the reality of the gaze and the response to others with a thick accent that I had. So this journey of overcoming transition of space and place through different ways of being and living is something that has been my story and my reality. I come from a background of hardworking individuals and parents, both Jamaican parents, who did the best that they could to try to create that life, that American dream life. And yet in the midst of all of that, there were difficulties within our own family story, from divorce and physical abuse. My mother remarried later on in life, and I have a very long-term reality of emotional, physical, sexual trauma, all of those things that were part of my early beginning and evolving in life. And what I began to understand over time, and I would say to others who either have a story that is similar to mine or understand the reality of life changing and throwing you challenges that you did not expect, you didn't plan, you didn't bring into your being, that there's still hope, that there's still the reality on the other side. And so for me, it was through education, through my mind, through the power of the spirit, through the gift of my cultural heritage, all of those things over time became the anchor through my life that I began to move through. And so education became an anchor. Growing to love myself was an important other anchor. Using therapeutic supports, counselors was an important anchor. And the power of my own spiritual growth, all of those things combined to provide this woman that is speaking to you right now with all of those achievements through academia and through a variety of professional and lived experience. I understand what transition means, what trauma feels like, and what the overcoming resilience building process means for individuals. Because the power of the human spirit is a thing that never ultimately, we can't quantify, but the quality of it with support, coaching, external and internal work, we are quite possible of way, way more than we can ever begin to think or imagine. So that's an encapsulated version. And I hope that in some ways, those who are listening can sort of capture some of the nuggets and perhaps hear their story in my own story.
That's beautiful. And thank you for sharing from the heart, which is one of the reasons I'm particularly pleased to have you address the topics that we're sharing and talking about today. You have a very special way of helping people, coaching people through pain, through literally realigning their identity, through growing new arms, new legs, new spirit after being, crushed by life. And, the sudden job loss, the traumas of loss of loved ones to disease. I mean, yes. And these losing loved ones in isolation. Yes. We are currently facing trauma at levels that are just, first of all, globally, and, yes. and levels that are just, it will test any humankind. So I really am appreciative of you starting to talk with our audience about, what are some of those things that we can do in order to begin to cope with and develop a way to go through, manage through, and survive trauma?
Well, what becomes important to begin is to acknowledge that something has happened. I mean, part of how we begin to reclaim our stories, reset the compass, and begin to path a way forward is being able to tell the truth. And the truth telling begins with ourselves. I know that there are many who have experienced the reality of the furlough, of the business that is no longer in existence, or perhaps is on hiatus, and that regular paycheck, the insurance that was to come is no longer. The challenges you described of loved ones who are far away, perhaps have been lost. But the beginning of any journey of starting over is that we have to tell the truth. We have to acknowledge that this is our reality. And so trauma is this distorted experience of what happens when we feel threatened and we perceive that threat to be imminent and upon our lives. And so trauma is a personal journey and experience, from a car accident to a hurricane, to a dental procedure, to an assault upon the person, but also it's its own assault upon our way of life and being now. There's a collective experience globally, stateside, locally, wherever you are, that is occurring. And so to begin, we have to speak the truth, what has happened. And so starting from that place, we can begin to then name the loss that is present. And so oftentimes the responses to trauma are biological or physiological response to a thing that is threatening. Is that for many of us, we fight, we freeze, or we flee. And so that's often the response, certainly to natural disasters and to things unplanned, but very much the same thing that we are going through in this pandemic. Some of us have frozen. I mean, this freeze response that we get stuck, the stuckness, the stuck places. And for many, that experience is one that is familiar. So it's touched that button and that place of being re-traumatized to that place of feeling like control has been taken away and this thing that was not planned has occurred. So that frozen place that freezes mind, body, spirit, the capacity to think and to rationally begin to explore options is a real, natural, and let me say, normal response. Okay, so some of us freeze. That was my own personal response physically going through the hurricanes here in the Virgin Islands, frozen for 15 minutes. And the most profound fear I have never felt in my life. And I shared with you very briefly my own trauma background. And so this trauma response is a real one, so freezing. So those of you who may be listening and viewing, to think about, what has your response been to this reality of COVID-19 and the traumatic impacts? Some of us flee, we run, oh Lord, we run, does not happen to me, run. So there's a disconnection from what is happening. In some ways, well, if I can deny it long enough, somehow that's gonna make it go away. But you may already be getting those inbox things from bill collectors, the mail may be piling up, things may be occurring that is showing you that you're running away from what is. And so that fleeing response is a real one that is a response to a traumatic experience. And then there are others who, ooh, it is fight time, baby, time to fight. Trauma brings out the fight response. And so for myself, using my most recent experience, particularly around these hurricanes, after I froze for those 15 minutes, that death felt imminent. And I want to say to those listening and hearing, it is your perception of what is happening to you. It's not anybody else is telling you of it. It is your personal experience of what is occurring and how you react and respond and perceive. So your perception of what is happening to someone may be very different from their lived experience. And so the fight, when the fight then began to manifest itself after I had shifted from the hurricane, those 15 minutes, and I was able to connect with the fight in my husband, and we grabbed buckets and water and towels and all of that. And so for those of you listening and viewing, think about what your response has been to this threat of COVID-19, particularly to your sense of who you are, your livelihood, your family connection, your identity, your sense of worth, who you are in the world. Did you freeze? Have you fought? Have you flee from what is happening? And so beginning with telling the truth is the starting point of beginning the path forward to begin to open up next steps. So beginning from that place is absolutely essential.
And that's, I think, that's the place that almost adds even more fear is, you know, in our book, Create Income With or Without a Job. In fact, that's one of the first things that we recommend people try to get in touch with. You know, the financial fear is usually paralyzing. I mean, it's just overwhelming. So we try to, we promote and recommend and teach people in the book through exercises how to face their financial fears, and then establish a 90-day transitional period where they can kind of free themselves from that fear. There's the crushing part of that fear, in order to be able to, take some type of creative action, have some type of creative thinking toward what they will do next. But just what you're speaking of is terrifying in itself, facing the fear, telling the truth.
Telling the truth, absolutely. And in order to do what you just said, in terms of one of the wonderful steps that you've outlined in the process and the program, is that you have to acknowledge that the fear exists. Because without it, to begin to engage the program and the steps that are required to look at the bills, to look at the budget, to take a view at how are you eating? How can you eat differently? That attachment to, oh my gosh, I used to love to be able to go to this favorite place, my favorite meal, the salon, oh, my nails look horrible. Oh my God, I don't want to see anyone to see me. All of that, but telling the truth and going, okay, this is what is. And to know that you are in fact in a community of many globally. I think so often part of what trauma does is that it distorts and it isolates, because it's a personally lived experience. And part of what I hope, both from the program that you are offering to so many, I'm so grateful that you're inspired to provide this step-by-step process for so many who are suffering, is that it helps to break out and separate out the sense that though this is my lived experience, I'm actually part of a community, global and otherwise, that is going through this. So if you can allow yourself to connect with that, be it existential reality, or as we move down both the conversation and making connections that help to create your own community and moving forward, it helps to move beyond the denial phase. Because the longer one stays in denial and the longer the freeze impact takes hold, it has a multiple cascading impact on the capacity and the ability to function, right? So it then begins to creep into, if you're not already experiencing fundamental issues around daily living, around sleep, around eating, around physical hygiene, the very things, in fact, that you need to do to stay healthy in this COVID-19 pandemic, the ability to hear yourself back. So likely there may be some distortion happening in your thought life that may impact your capacity to tell the truth. And it may open the door to those things from the past that may seep into identity, self-worth, tapes and negative schemas from the past that begin to take root and impact a distorted way of how you see yourself now. So this opening of telling the truth provides that slow window and path forward to look at what in fact are some things in a day-to-day, morning, afternoon, evening, practice, process, rhythm that can slowly help me to engage. Now, there may be those who their survival instincts just kick in because the will to live is everything, right? And so survival, that natural instinct inside, that God-given will to live. If I have breath, I am living. So this breath of life, the gift of life, that thing kicks in, however you describe the thing, however you name it, that survival to feed your children, to feed yourself. That may be the very stimulus that those who are viewing and listening have used. But being able to not just push into that survival mode, but to be able to quiet it such that you can begin to be thoughtful in some of the steps that you are outlining in this process. So survival is everything. It kept us all alive here in the VI and other places who've gone through the natural ravages from disaster. And yet survival over time becomes exhausting and taxing, and it distorts over time. And so telling the truth, slowing down the process so that we can think with the front part of our brain and not purely be activated through our fear center, which is in a part of the brain called the amygdala. We have to quiet it down so we can tap into the wholeness of our being, that we can go, I'm going to do this. I have experiences from the past. Not, wait a minute, not this distorted stuff, but wait a minute, in the past, when this has happened to me, when I first started school, when I began graduate school, when I first started my first job, when I had my first child, we have patterns and history that teaches us back to ourselves who we are, but trauma distorts it and it flips the switch that we sometimes can't see it. And so it's important to begin from that place of telling the truth and slowing down the response, that we can have a more fuller, wholer perspective on who we really are.
And you're touching on so many really important aspects of the type of trauma that all of us are engaged in. All of us worldwide are going through trauma right now. And so what you mentioned about, for example, the most typical trauma of sudden job loss is certainly the financial loss, but it's also this loss of self-worth, of self-value, and in many cases, self-identity. So many people identify with their work, and in fact, they don't have another visible, obvious identity that they automatically in their own self-talk address outside of their work. They define themselves 100% through their work. And so the loss of, and sudden loss like this of a job, and for those of us who are business owners, my goodness, our lives are invested in building these businesses. And then also building the people who are members of our teams and the support businesses that we collaborate with. There's so much that gets lost in terms of self-value, identity, and in this type of trauma.
Absolutely. And as you were talking, part of the theme that bubbles up from that is that there's so much grief that is present. Grief is intricately interwoven in everything that you just talked about, from the loss of money, which is a real thing. You need money to live and to function. The loss of identity as it was connected to whatever that professional space and place was. The loss of the social connections that were present. And for some, literally right now, the loss of loved ones. I mean, because COVID-19, there are people who are grieving from loss. And so grief is an ongoing process that is present here in this COVID reality. And I haven't heard as much conversation around that. I mean, like, who wants to talk about grief? Oh my goodness. But grief is present. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I had this experience that it felt like I could feel this sort of tsunami of this wave of this thing that was present as I took in sort of the numbers, when you see kind of the update of infections and the global numbers and all, and I felt it. I mean, it just felt like this cumulative impact of taking in that these are lives. These are not numbers. These are human beings who are sons and daughters, husbands and wives and grandma and grandpa and babies and real life people. And so taking in that along with this real lived experience of what was that is no longer. And so we have to then acknowledge that there are things that are lost that we have to acknowledge and tell the truth that we're also grieving. And all of us have a history of how we grieve. We don't often use that language. We typically associate it simply with sort of death, typically around a loved one. But we all have grief patterns. How do you grieve? How do you say goodbye to a thing that was precious and a part of your life? When we relocate from one environment to a next, transitions in our lives are all about losses and moving forward. But in order to transition to the next thing, you have to say goodbye to what was, good and bad. So we all have a loss and grief process and pattern that is a part of us. And so often we don't take a look at it. Do we acknowledge? Do we connect? For business owners, what has that process been like to be able to connect with those who were part of the circle? How has the loss been manifesting? How do you memorialize or give voice to that place inside? I mean, we in many ways, we have birthdays, we have anniversaries, we acknowledge the date of when someone significant has passed, from 9/11 to all of that. We do this all the time. And so for us in our personal lived experience now, grief is a part of what many are feeling, but we can't name it or often don't have language for. So for those of you who are watching and are listening, to think about that for yourself, that place of that lostness. So it's not just money, it's more than that. And so the ability to allow it to be present. So my experience a couple of weeks ago when I connected with that place, I allowed that movement of that emotion to move through my being. And for it to be present, I didn't push it away. I allowed myself the space to let it flow through. And I cried and I wept for what was present and is present in the world. And once I did that, it allowed it to flow through me so that I didn't hold it in me. And because often what then happens is that the cumulative impact of those experiences then become a part of us. Belly aches, neck pain, headache, migraine, lower back pain. Those emotional parts of us get trapped in the body because we are mind, body, and spirit. And so this collective experience that we're all going through, for many, it's showing up in ways in their bodies that they're like, what's going on? I've been a healthy person. Then we're like, oh my God, I hope that's not connected to the virus. And oh, what's going on? Lord help, all of that. But for many, the reality of the emotional impact of loss and losses can show up in our bodies. And so having an appropriate space to release that. What do we do when somebody's grieving? Sometimes we need company. Somebody just comes to be with us. So we need company in our grief process. When somebody passes, we come in and we're with somebody. So we can physically be with one another physically, but I'm going to check in. I'm going to have that space just to check in that I can be with someone and vice versa. What else do we do when someone is grieving? Sometimes we send them food. We send them a word of encouragement. We pray for them. We do things to uplift, and we don't try to move them away from that place, because experiencing that is a part of what helps to tell the truth. And as you tell the truth, it opens up the path forward. So grieving through job loss, business loss, the loss of contracts, all of that has to be moved through and processed as we then begin to claim the path forward, gifts and talents, abilities. Who are you distinct from this job? You are the person doing the work, but oh my goodness, you may be surprised as you work through Jamila's plan to discover that there are gifts and talents that have been covered over, have been put aside for a season in your life. And perhaps, just perhaps, this is the time, not just through the survival process, but this time of discovery and breakthrough that may be waiting for you.
We are speaking with Dr. Marilyn Brathwaite Hall. I just want to share her information quickly with our audience. If you're just tuning in, we are speaking with Dr. Marilyn Brathwaite Hall, who is a personal coach. And Dr. Hall, if you'd like to reach out to her, her email address is drmarilynbhall@gmail.com. drmarilynbhall@gmail.com. Feel free to send an email to her. She does have a telepractice, meaning that she does coaching sessions, much like we are using technology today. So she will schedule consultations, determine if you would like to work together with her for help as a personal coach. And I can tell you that she has changed and touched many lives. And we're going to now go into some of those specific strategies that she uses with people to help us to move through and beyond trauma and come out thriving instead of just surviving. But I also want to share at this time and remind you that you're watching Create Income with or without a job. And we also have our audiobook program, Create Income with or without a job. The book is available as an immediate audio download from our website, createincomewithoutajob.com. Createincomewithoutajob.com. And we have a special quarantine price of only $12.99. You simply go to our website, click Buy Books, and click the Create Income with or without a job book cover, and you will simply receive that automatic download immediately and begin to walk through the step by step process. This is born from, personal experience of sudden job loss from many years ago and many times since. And these are actual step-by-step to do tasks, exercises. It's a guidance. It's literally a guide to financial recovery, and you will learn how to create income immediately for yourself as well. So we just want to encourage you to join our Create Income family, and we look forward to helping the millions of people out there who, like myself, when I lost my full-time job the first time in 1980, and just literally after, savings ran out, unemployment ran out, and there were no jobs because it was a federal, situation where over 250,000 people lost their jobs at the same time. So there were no jobs, just like today. And so it came down to figuring out how to use your natural talents, gifts, and abilities to create income so that you could create money to buy food, to have shelter, to have those basics in life. So Dr. Marilyn Brathwaite Hall, let's talk about, you have a few recommendations that you've made about how to, in telling the truth, we have to create a space for, basically talk about that, creating space in the silence, and what it is we would be doing with that.
Well, it's interesting. I remember we had the conversation some days ago, and so often the shock of the loss, right? And all of the ways that it ricochets throughout our lives and our beings. So where does the recalibration come? And so it may be literally a physical space. So do you have a table? Do you have a little top, that you can clear off? Sometimes we need literally a space that is cleared off, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes people may create a sort of an altar, an anchoring space, things that when you see give you back affirmation of who you are. So creating a space. So often both the trauma and the reality, there's so much information. You turn on the TV, you turn on the radio, you go on social media, the bombardment of information, fact, myth, fiction, all connected to this, along with your own personal experience, creates so much noise in our heads. And so being able to create space, be it a physical space or going inward. So one of the things that I have appreciated about even the language of sheltering in is a way in which an invitation for all of us to shelter in the inner parts of who we are. And so that silent place is a place for us to hear ourselves. So when we create silence, you may need necessarily even put on some headphones if your home life is such that there's so many others in there, you have children or others. Maybe it's the bathroom. You put a sign on the bathroom door, right? In progress, silent space, safe space, 20 minutes, sorry. Put the headphones on and you may just need to hear yourself. Trauma distorts and impacts in such a way that it impacts our sensory intake. So you may need to hear and listen differently. So the silent places may open up places inside of our subconscious that in the noise of all of what is taking place, we can't hear ourselves. And so lighting a candle, using essential oils, taking a shower, taking a bath, going inward, sheltering in, who is going to take care of you in deeper, more nourishing ways at this point when you are feeling that survival instinct to get something in? You've got to quiet it down and silence those places that create that speed to get it done. But if we're doing it from that hairy, distorted place, all of us is not going to be present to do what's needed. And so the silence is the most powerful place to hear ourselves. And even before the shutdown and all, perhaps you have not allowed yourself much silent space filled with activity, the next thing, the next meeting, the next marketing thing, the next piece, the children this, the homework, all of that. So perhaps, just perhaps, this is your season to shelter in differently. So silence, meditation, encouraging and expanding and connecting with this notion of mindfulness. So before I connected with my dear friend Jamila here, I had an issue with my laptop that was creating a buzz. And so it was like, oh my gosh. And so it's very easy in the moment to get so frazzled. And so for me, I needed to center in the moment, breathe. So as I was texting her, I allowed myself to flow, let that thing flow through me, because I realized that if I got wrapped up in that and was fighting against it, I would be this frazzled person, be like, Jimmy, you don't even want to have me. Let's just reschedule because this is not going to work. But this is what is real. Mm-hmm. Our capacity to adapt, to be mindful in the moment is our power source. This is like a power source that we have. And for many of us, we are not aware of it because we've been doing so much. We're used to all the doing, but we're not used to being. And so sheltering in and going inward through the silence that may acknowledge that we're grieving and we feel really sad, acknowledging that we feel really needy. And the question is, well, what do I need? If you allow yourself to be silent, now, what exactly do I need? Yes, money. I need money right now. But in this moment, what in fact do I need? I want to hear someone to say to me, you are worthy. You are capable. You are valuable. You are appreciated. Your life matters. And so maybe in that moment, you need to say that to yourself and allow that to resonate. And perhaps in that moment, you may go, I need some company right now. And so that may be an outreach to somebody as you move forward in this journey, creating income without a job and moving forward and a path beyond this COVID-19, that it may be a part of your support circle. As I said before, with grief and loss, we often have company in the journey and in the process. With new ventures, we have partners, weight loss, walking, running a marathon. You have coaches and people and mentors along the way. Jamila will be your coach. You're create income, without a job coach. But maybe you need company for someone to say, girl, right now, give me that, give me what I need. You are worthy. I appreciate you. You are capable. You have done it before and you will do it again. Oh, got it. Thank you.
And it's so important. And you've really been very instrumental in my life and also helping me to grow into being one of those persons to others. You call it being a safe place. And you are really gifted at creating a safe places for people, being that safe place where when the person is freaking out, when the fear is trying to overtake them, you're the one that we can call or text and you just say, girl, you got it going on. God's got you in the palm of his hand. You know how dynamic you are. You know how many times you've been down and how many times you've gotten up, girlfriend.
Bam, that's right.
This ain't nothing for you. You are well equipped, more than equal to the task.
And I appreciate you saying that, because in those moments, we have profound amnesia. because our brain loop and our memory loop in that fear center, it distorts in the moment, right? And so we're pulling, and we go back into that place that is all about fear and grabbing. Fear distorts. And I've come to really appreciate that, in whatever wisdom system, spiritual practice, religious practice that those who are watching and listening that you partake of and as a part of your ongoing practice, fear and the release of fear is often a part of most spiritual practices. So fear grows out of our humanness, our brain function. There's no spiritual practice that encourages fear. I mean, there is none. It's often about love, right? And in those moments when we feel fear and get disconnected from the self, we need oftentimes another human person if our spiritual connection is at that time feels far away or feels questionable or distant. Sometimes we need the human present in order to do that and encourage us to create that link. And so I just want to encourage individuals as well that their spiritual power is also a part of their repertoire, that though it's an automatic thing, but to be able to cultivate it with deep and intentional ways is also part of the kind of toolkit that is deliberate and a part of what can be a really powerful dynamic in order to help to create the way forward. And so that place of creating sanctuary and safety is important. There may be those, quite frankly, who are viewing and listening. This experience has opened up parts of themselves that they thought that they were finished with. That it's touched that button in that place that creates that vulnerability of losses and things that were in the past, and is opening up Pandora in a way that is unexpected. And so individuals who feel like perhaps that their mental health and their well-being is tenuous, or there's been some concern about their safety or well-being, I would be remiss to say that if you have those concerns, there are many, many resources. The Suicide Prevention Hotline, SAMHSA has a disaster distress helpline that is staffed 24/7. If I could find them to have the number, but those resources are available. If in fact you still have some insurance that is present, even as you wait and are shifting, you may have been furloughed, but your insurance may be intact. Telemental health in terms of psychotherapy, perhaps some trauma counseling, explicit work to deal with some things that are opening up for you may be necessary right now. So I wanted to share that because it's important that that everyone pay attention to the impact of these kind of cumulative stressors. And if there is some history of mental illness or mental health concerns that may be bubbling up to the surface, don't push it away. This may be in fact a time for you to re-engage with a clinician, a psychotherapist, psychologist, a mental health professional to help you to move through. And someone like myself that can help you to do that forward looking and to create steps and plans and look at mindfulness practices or resources that are present with you and perhaps help you to begin to change and shift the narrative that may temporarily be a part of your circumstance, but is not a reality of what is to be for the future, then I can be of support. But for those of you who are experiencing the mental health challenges and some other things are creeping up, then absolutely to be able to reach out for resources to support that part of your wellness journey.
And Dr. Hall, we do have that number that you wanted to share for the National Suicide Hotline. And for our viewers, we'll just put it on the screen. That number is 1-800-273-8255. That is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. 1-800-273-8255. And for those of you who've just joined us, We are talking with Dr. Marilyn Brathwaite Hall, who is a personal coach and is available also. Feel free to reach out to Dr. Hall by email. Her email address is drmarilynbhall@gmail.com. Dr. Marilyn, that's Dr. Marilyn B. Hall @gmail.com.
Jamila, I did find the number. Let me also share another number for those who may be
Okay.
viewing and listening for the Disaster Distress Helpline. And that is staffed by SAMHSA, which is the federal government, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Agency. And it's 1-800-985-5990. Again,
Okay.
that's
I'm getting
1-800-985-5990.
So now we're sharing another number,
Yes.
which is 1-800-985, 985
Yes.
5990. And that is
Yes.
SAMHSA. What does SAMHSA stand for, Dr. Brathwaite Hall?
It's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Agency, but people can find it. SAMHSA is mental health.
Okay.
And there's also a text version for those who find texting to be easier.
Okay.
They can text "Talk with Us" to 66746. And it's staffed multilingually. And so if someone has particular language needs outside of English, there are prompts that will come up, and there are crisis counselors available in, I think, at least a dozen languages that will text back and forth. And certainly the same is the case for the 1-800 number as well.
And so these are vital resources available to you right this moment. If you are really feeling what many of us feel as we go through the different, I mean, from morning to lunchtime, the pressures can sometimes just be overwhelming, but don't feel that you don't have help. Don't feel that you're alone. Reach out. There's human contact available, and human contact that's trained as well as that understands. So 1-800-985-5990 is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Agency hotline. And if you'd like to send a text "Talk with Us" to 66746. Talk
Yes.
with Us to 66746. Thank you for those resources.
Absolutely.
Dr.
And I think that that's part of what becomes important, right? And so as you sort of tell the truth, acknowledge if you freeze, if you fight, if you flee, acknowledge the reality of the grief process and the journey, then the issue of engaging sort of the fight in a way that is about creating that path forward. And is part of what Jamila has created step by step in this process of creating income without a job. So often we forget all of the gifts and talents that are part of who we are. And there's a wonderful way in which Jamila just helped you to tease that out and to really begin to look at who are you? There's so many ways in which the rhythm of working, running a business, all of that at times we really forget. And so part of what becomes helpful in terms of building what I do at times with individuals that I've worked with, their own sort of resilience building plan, right? So what are my gifts or talents? What is it that I know that I have? And that narrative becomes really important to delineate them, to tease them out, becomes really important. It's also helpful to ask yourself the question, how have I engaged adversity previously? As I said before, we all have a history. I know in my own journey, my own story, sometimes I forget. And it's important to have those around you who remind you, sometimes I get stuck, right, in my humanness. And so what is your story of overcoming that sometimes you need to write out. So your own story, your own narrative, and what are the key pieces that you can pull out of your own story that perhaps you need to put up on a bulletin board, you need to put up on your mirror, you need to put up on your refrigerator to remind yourself back to yourself of who you are. Because again, that amnesia sets in when that overwhelming reality of what is present here is occurring. And so there are things that we have had happen to us that didn't break us. And our notion in the moment and the time that we felt broken, but oh my goodness, when we look back over our shoulders, when I look back over the incredible journeys that I've gone through, what felt like massive valley experiences, but yet it didn't define who I am through being able to accomplish degrees and doctoral studies and postdocs and all of that, and creating space for others to be able to hear themselves into their own wellness. Sometimes we need company and support for someone else to be that catalyst, and at times a nudge, and at times a push with support and love to help us to be able to do that. And I'm absolutely humbled whenever I'm able to provide that for individuals in countless ways. And a couple of the things that I would share is that I believe the power of culture is a very powerful teaching tool for all of us. The many of us that we come out of cultural backgrounds, particularly those of African ancestry, this culture and this journey I know well, as a West Indian woman, a Jamaican woman, there are things embedded in our cultural stories that are part of us, both in terms of meaning making, identity development, resilience building, all of these things that are in us that at times we often just take for granted because we're living it. And these moments like a COVID-19 causes us to stop. And when we're able to slow down enough, it causes that place to explore and to remind and perhaps even rediscover some of the cultural lessons that are present in our oral history, in the history of our forebears, our foremothers and our forefathers. Who is in your ancestral line? Those who are listening and watching, that you can draw strength from, whose legacies and stories of their own overcoming they poured and planted in you. Even in the broken stuff, even in the stories that are not good, there's some pieces in there that can be culled that you can use for right now. And so I think oftentimes we forget the legacies of our cultural histories that we can stand upon and use in particular and distinct ways to explore identity, resilience, business, entrepreneurship, gratefulness, gratitude, the role of food, music, all these things that are sustaining, that are in us, they're part of us. And in this time and in this lived experience collectively and individually, I invite all to begin to sort of slow down enough to look and see those other resources that may be at hand that naturally we may not think about. But I'm far more reminded these days that we have power in our legacies than we often bring to bear.
So I do want to just recap just quickly for those who have recently joined our interview, and even for those who've been listening, some powerful tools that you have given us for how to begin to deal with trauma, not just live in the trauma, but deal with trauma with the steps and plan and projection of moving beyond the trauma. And so you have talked about, first of all, facing the fear, telling the truth about what has happened, about what we feel about what's happened, actually experiencing our grief as, because there's so much that's being lost. And there is grief about that. And then getting in touch with what is my grief pattern, because I've lost things before. I've relocated from one place to another. That meant I had to leave something behind to go to the new place. I've lost a job before. I've lost money before. I've lost family members before. So each one of us has a grief pattern. So already have a pattern of how we respond to and grieve about these losses. And so you've really suggested very clearly getting quiet and
Mm-hmm.
practicing being in the silence for a few minutes at a time, you
Mm-hmm.
know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And in the case of where many of us are sheltering in place and at sheltering at home, staying
Yes.
home, where
Mm-hmm.
there are more people in the house together at one time, establishing that boundary of, okay, this is mom's 20 minutes in the bathroom uninterrupted, or this
Mm-hmm.
is dad's 20 minutes in the office, the home office. You know, don't knock on the door. This is not time for anybody to need anything. This is my time that I am going to practice the silence of being alone with myself, listening
Mm-hmm.
to my self-talk. And
Mm-hmm.
then you've also shared something even so powerful, which is to create our support system or reach out to our support system. You've got to have someone who
Mm-hmm.
can, when you are at that brink, you
Mm-hmm.
can call, text, you know, Zoom with, whatever, and hear the feedback that you are valuable. Your life matters.
Mm-hmm.
You will get through this. You
Yes.
will move beyond this. You have moved beyond things before. You are strong enough. You
Mm-hmm.
are talented enough. You are special. And it's so important to have that voice or those voices and that type of support. So these are all tools that you have recommended that we can practically use and implement as we
Mm-hmm.
move through our trauma to that new positive place of overcoming.
Wow, that was beautifully said. Thank you so much. I so I've been co-hosting a radio show for the last 2 years, to my great surprise. And this is really an example of life manifesting itself out of broken places. I did not intentionally seek to be a co-host of a wellness program, but it grew out of an invitation to speak to a group. And that speaking to one group about um, essentially, it was acute stress response. What happens after we've gone through traumatic experiences from the hurricanes? We did breathing, we did meditation. We talked about the ways in which that the normal response can be manifested in all of us. So one thing led to another and funding sources, which then started this show. Little did I know 2 years later that it would be a thing now. And so I share that with those listening and viewing to know that in the broken places, this grew out of a traumatic experience. And so I use my own, this most recent part of my own story, as I could have used many other parts of coming out of traumatic experiences in my life that I thought that I would not recover from, or I thought that the broken places were too deep for me. And yet it's often in that bridge over to the other side of wellness, once you get out the freeze and of the flight, and you engage the fight with intention, not fist fighting, but fight with engagement and being open. My heart and my mind was open to be of support. And so from that started this radio show. And we have 80 something shows that we have done, to my great surprise. And part of what people tell me that they look forward to hearing is that I always have a breathing pause. And so I share that one as an important, essential tool. We've got to breathe, people. And I know you go, Dr. Marilyn, what breathe? Of course I'm breathing, I'm watching you. But intentional breath work, breathing on purpose, breathing with the aim of slowing down, of sheltering in, is the gift we give to ourselves. There's so many YouTube channels, programs, apps around meditation and mindfulness. But even in the most basic way, if you take a nice deep breath in through your nose, let your belly rise and hold for 4, 3, 2, 1, and you exhale through your mouth. Inhale through your nose. Yes, hold 4, 3, 2, 1, and exhale. If you do that to begin your day as a midday pause before you go to bed at night, and you practice, there's so many different ways. You can breathe with a count. We sometimes on the show do closing our eyes. We do imagery work, creating that safe place inside. If I invited you to do that breathing work, to close your eyes, and where's that safe place inside? Is it a person, feeling held by that person in this age of no physical connection? Is it a scene? Is it a beach? Is it a forest? Is it a path? Where's that place inside for you that, oh, it's your place of sanctuary and safety? You can do imagery work on the inside. You can do progressive muscle relaxation, which means you start from the top of your head and you're tightening and releasing all the major muscle groups until you get to your feet, and you work it all the way back up from your feet, all the way back up to your head. You know, there is yoga and yoga pauses and yoga movement and all of these things that for some may be new, and for others, they used to do it. I used to do that stuff a long time ago, but life and business and working pushed it aside. And so maybe, just maybe, this time and this place, even as you deal with the realities of the pressing needs, that I encourage you to think about it as a time to cultivate a sheltering in well-being in a way that perhaps you wouldn't naturally. Perhaps this is your invitation to yourself in a way that allows the deepening connection to the power of who you are, regardless of COVID-19, so that when this passes, and this too will pass, however long it takes, however the rhythm of the season, we don't know, but you will be here. And the question is, what will the quality of who you are be when this shifts in different ways? So mindfulness work, breath work, movement work, silence, and journaling. I've been journaling since I was, I think, in the 4th or 5th grade. It's a powerful, safe space, again, that you can see yourself, back to yourself. Sometimes it's a place to cuss somebody out because you can't say it with your mouth. You can write all the stuff down, you can't say it. Or it's a way to begin to imagine, you know, to tap into your creative gifts, to actually begin to write down, what if? So what if all your money was restored? Would you go back to that job? What if? You know, the what ifs, and you began to just write that out. What if? What are those dreams and those places that you have tucked away? What if you began to write them down differently in that silent space, in that place that you set aside just for you? So those are some of the other tools and things that have been, I think, helpful for others, as I've learned certainly over these last 2 years doing the show, that I have personally benefited from. So it's been my own recovery and wellness journey as we've come out of these natural disasters that have expanded and helped to anchor and grow my own wellness that I share with those who are viewing and listening.
Absolutely extraordinary. And I want to revisit one thing that you have shared with me and cautioned me about as I implement, especially that inviting company in and that's tapping into support networks of people who, you know, reinforce and remind me, even though I'm walking through this challenge right now, I'm strong, I'm capable, I will get through this, I will thrive, not only survive. You cautioned me, and I want to make sure that our viewers and listeners receive this wisdom which you gave to me when advising me, as coaching me about, you know, support networks. And it was about the appropriate, inviting the appropriate company.
Everybody does not need to be invited to be with you in this journey at all. And we know this from our own journeys and experiences, with dating, with children, who's giving you advice about how to, you know, mother your children or what to feed you. So all of that. We have individuals in our lives who play different roles, and they have part of our connectedness for a season and a time. Everyone cannot journey with you in this space right now. But those individuals in your circle who may be pulling on you in a way that you can't be available for them, I'd encourage you to be thoughtful about who in that circle can be your partner, perhaps you need an accountability partner as you move forward. That's something that I have done in different ways for individuals over the years. But everyone can be invited because they, in fact, can bring you more misery and disconnection and distortion and remind you of, remember before when they in fact push play in the play that you don't need to hear right now. It's different to be able to be a authentic, clarifying, authentic, honest sounding board for someone. So if I'm in denial, I need someone who can help me to speak the truth, not condemn, but support with honest reflection and feedback. That's very different from someone who will critique, criticize to tear down. And so those distinctions become really important. It's kind of like with grieving, right? And I use that example because we've all been through that journey in different ways. Everybody who comes to be a part of that journey, who stops by the house, perhaps, with the casserole or what have you, you're like, oh Lord, that is who is he? Because you know, and you have to put up you got to get the guard ready. You got to get, let me fortify myself. You don't need fortification against someone. You want someone to assist in fortifying you. So those distinctions are significantly important. And so this may be a time and a season in the sheltering in that clarifying, there may in fact be some folks in your circle who in the sheltering season, it may in fact be time to shift and shelter differently with some folk, and it may be when you tell the truth, when you're silent, when you speak your story back to yourself, you may see some patterns of relationships with others that may show you that in fact, this is different. And perhaps they can be a different type of resource to you. Perhaps they know how to source things. They're on the internet all the time looking at resources. Perhaps you can tap them to be your resource connection. And that's not the person that you tap when, oh, I'm going through, give me a word, tell me back to myself who I am. Or maybe they're the person to, just check in. Did you stretch today? How did you do with your silence time? I tried this meditation. Let me share the link with you. Perhaps individuals can be specific in their role, part of your advisory reboot team. Everybody may have a role to play, but everybody can't play the role that they perhaps may want to play. And as you move down this path, with Jamila's support and assistance, that looking at who may be strategically supportive as you move forward. So thank you for sharing that, because everybody can't just be invited by virtue of because they're there, but perhaps this is the time to be more thoughtful and insightful about who may need to be invited in a specific and particular way.
So for our viewers, I want to remind you, we are speaking with Dr. Marilyn Hall, who is a personal coach, and she is available for coaching and her email address is drmarilynbhall@gmail.com. drmarilynbhall@gmail.com. You may feel free to reach out to her and schedule a teleconference. We also want to remind you that you're watching Create Income with or Without a Job, and our audiobook program, which guides you step by step by step through the journey of sudden job loss and what to do with your inner being, with your finances, with recreating immediate ways to create income, identifying your natural talents, skills, and abilities that you've been given to prosper with. And the audiobook is at a quarantine price now, only $12.99 at createincomewithoutajob.com. You simply click buy books and the Create Income Without a Job cover, and that will be an immediate download directly to you to your device. And we also recommend the other videos on our YouTube channel. This YouTube channel, Create Income Coach, is designed to give instructional, actual how-to videos that teach you how to do everything that is in the audiobook program. So we go into detail and lead you and guide you through the exercises, through the thought process, etc. It is our goal to serve and help as many of the millions of people who we feel the collective, panic about having lost jobs and lost businesses. And we just feel collectively that responsibility to be a resource to as many of you as we can. And so we encourage you to tune in, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do our best to produce videos almost daily in order to be there, to be a support for you. So Dr. Hall, as you have shared with us, and your personal coaching process, I have found to be very unique. So talk to us a little bit about if you were to receive an email from me, and what would kind of be our process of you determining if you could coach and assist me, what kinds of questions should I be prepared to answer for you, or what should I provide for you to establish a relationship with you as a personal coach?
Yes, so thank you for that. So I think it's important when we are making that connection that the fit feels right. It's kind of like checking out a new relationship, so to speak. And so it would be important to know what are the pressing needs right now. So I would want to know by virtue of what is most important to focus on. Are we looking at issues impacting your the quality of your decision-making process? Are you feeling stuck in your ability to make decisions? Is it some dreams that have been on hold that are important? So there's a brief assessment questionnaire that we would go through. Past job experience, what in fact has been your experience in the past working with a coach? What kind of time are you willing to devote? Is this something that is immediate? Is this something that weekly, you have a plan, but you need sort of an accountability individual to check in? Is there a particular pattern that you'd like to focus on that keeps showing itself? And it becomes important because there's some things, as I said before, that are more psychotherapy, therapeutic, clinical in nature, and coaching is more sort of forward directed. And so at the beginning, we would tease that out to ensure that the work that we would do together really is about kind of steps forward, because some steps forward are really connected to past stuff. And if the past stuff becomes what is most key, then it's my both duty, moral, and otherwise to clarify, and we can talk through some next steps around that. So let's explore what are therapeutic, clinical possibilities available to you, be it online, through insurance, perhaps through your church. What else might be available and possible? And if in fact this is no, I've done some of that work, this is forward directed, then we can delineate what's most important. So if there are top 3 things, what would that look like? And then we create some an action plan, come up with an agreement, make some decisions in terms of frequency, costs, and then begin the process. I believe in the power of human beings to transform and to transcend. I'm incredibly humbled by the power of the human spirit to do amazing things. And at times we just need company along the way to hold our hand, to push us a bit, to rub our back, figuratively speaking, to have that level of support. And at other times to say, let's look each other in the eye and to really be clear about what may be present, and to be able to have a safe enough space that we can speak truth and allow that truth to provide the direction. So it's both explicit, but it's also dynamic, because just like getting ready for this interview, I had prepped and gotten ready and boom, electronics at a different way, but we were adaptive and flexible to still make it happen. And so that's the nature of the coaching dynamic, right? To feed off of what is happening presently, but always in my role, keeping an eye on what you say it is that you're moving towards and holding that kind of steering wheel to guide the process so that you can ultimately drive it ultimately for yourself. It's holistic in nature. And so I believe mind, body, spirit is essential to who we are as individuals. So that becomes an important frame for how I see people and how I engage and work with individuals. The power of our minds, the gift of how we're using our bodies, what we're putting in our bodies, the quality of sleep, movement, all of that, and our spirits, how our spirits being nourished, be it from a wisdom, religious system, or from nature, music, all of that. And so it's integrative. So that's how I've always engaged and interacted and connected with individuals through the radio and otherwise. And certainly as we would be connecting to work together, it would be from that vantage point. And I certainly would consider it an honor anytime anyone allows me the opportunity to connect with their deep places to move them forward. So that's a bit of a encapsulated way in which that I would engage, but think holistic. And if you're ready for the holistic engagement to move forward, then we would find a good connection.
And we're speaking with Dr. Marilyn Brathwaite Hall. Her email address is drmarilynbhall@gmail.com. And Dr. Hall, I also will, when we post this video on our YouTube channel, we will include in the description a link to your podcast, because the weekly radio show Wellness Wednesdays that you have been co-hosting for the past 2 years since the trauma of Hurricanes Irma and Maria in the U.S. Virgin Islands is also available by podcast. So we will look forward to posting that link in the description of this video so that others can access the podcasts and enjoy Wellness Wednesdays as well.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I've been really so grateful. And I would, I know as we begin to wind down this gift of gratitude, I was reminded listening to a piece. I've been doing a kind of a meditation series through Oprah and all about the power of gratitude. And she, Oprah, was describing pulling out a gratitude journal from almost a decade ago, and reflecting on in that moment that she would write 5 things that she was grateful for as the day wound down. And she did describe this wonderful cold piece of melon, you know, that she ate, and the gift of having this I think it was an ice cream cone, and getting a call from Maya Angelou, who was sharing a poem, all of these things in a day, right? So an ice cold piece of melon. And so for those of you who are listening, perhaps even that step forward in the midst of all of this struggle, the stress, this push to survive in the midst of this pandemic, all that you have lost and all that you're beginning to sort out. There are things that we are grateful for that I would imagine that you are grateful for, even in this moment. And I would invite and encourage you to perhaps as a beginning from today, to perhaps even get a book or something that you would keep next to your nightstand to remind yourself of the gift of living even now. And so perhaps you could write down, if you can't get 5, maybe just 2. If you can't do 2, surely there's 1. And maybe that practice, and we know that it typically takes at least 7 weeks, at least, to begin to incorporate new behavior so that they become habit, to introduce and break habit patterns. So what if you began to have that to be part of perhaps your nighttime rhythm or your morning reflection of the previous day, ways in which to remind yourself, back to yourself, of how even in the midst of all that you're going through, all that we are going through, there is still things to be grateful for. And I learned that very much from the Wellness Show, that is a powerful resource that we have. Gratitude fuels hope, and hope fuels optimism, and optimism gives us the gift of trying it yet again. And so keeping hope alive is the gift and the anchor through all of this. And so gratitude is a secret weapon and a powerful ingredient to do that.
Dr. Marilyn Brathwaite Hall, wonderful personal coach, extraordinary and very creative person. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for sharing your gift of caring. You know, you have just such a healing, soothing, caring way of personally coaching those of us who are in your care. So we appreciate you, and we wish you success, and you and your family stay well and healthy. You are a matriarch. And so just like many women through this pandemic, we are wearing all different kind of hats, and generationally, we are taking care of families. And so we wish you energy and strength and peace of mind as well.
Thank you so, so much, Jamila. And thank you for the invitation to be a part of this journey of transformation, healing, wellness for all those who are listening and hearing. I'm grateful for your insight and your hearing to create this opportunity and this process for all the millions of individuals globally who are going through this life-changing reality. And I certainly hope that there's something that I have shared today in some small way that may have planted a seed for someone, that with some time, attention, that you would water it and grow it, that it would fuel you to know that you are able and capable to move through this in ways that perhaps will surprise you. So thank you so much. And I wish all of you great success and wellness, and that you are a gift because you are here.
You're watching Create Income with or without a job on our YouTube channel, Create Income Coach. I'm Jamila Harris, your Create Income Coach. Subscribe to our channel, like this video, and most of all, share. We want to help as many of those millions of folks who have lost jobs, who are struggling with everything that faces us. So we look forward to seeing you next time.